Most NFL fans think they understand offense. You have a quarterback, you have receivers, you have running backs, you have a playbook, then you score points. Simple. Except that's not actually how coaches think. Coaches don't start with plays, they don't start with statistics, and they don't start with fantasy football projections. They start with problems. More specifically, they start with creating problems for the defense. Every offensive coordinator walks into a game asking the same basic question. How can I force the defense to make a choice it doesn't want to make? Because that's where football games are won. Not when the defense knows exactly what's coming, but when the defense has to guess. Think about the best offenses you've ever watched. The greatest show on turf. The Patriots during their dynasty years. The Chiefs with Patrick Mahomes. The Lions under Ben Johnson. What did they all have in common? They force defenses into impossible decisions. If you defend this, they'll attack that. If you stop that, they'll attack something else. And eventually, the defense runs out of answers. That's what great offenses do. Which brings me to the Chicago Bears, because I think there's a battle taking place on this roster right now that most fans are overlooking. A battle that may tell us more about Ben Johnson's vision for his offense than any press conference, training camp report, or preseason game. And the funny thing is, it isn't really a battle about who starts. It's a battle about who stays on the field. Because the tight end who wins that battle may become the most important player on the entire roster. My name is Kenneth Pierce, and this is football's greatest Bears, or FGB. Today we're talking about who owns 11 personnel. Before we can answer that question, we need to make sure we're all talking about the same thing. 11 personnel means 1 running back, 1 tight end, 3 wide receivers. That's it. 1 back, 1 tight end, 3 receivers. If you've watched the NFL over the last decade, you've seen a lot of it. In many ways, it's become the default language of modern offense. But here's the part that many fans miss. 11 personnel isn't important because of the numbers. It's important because of the questions it forces the defense to answer. If the offense puts 3 receivers on the field, does the defense match with extra defensive backs? If the defense goes smaller, can the offense run the football? If the defense stays bigger, can the offense spread the field and throw? Every decision creates a consequence. Every adjustment creates vulnerability. And the best offenses know exactly where to attack. That's why coaches love 11 personnel. Not because it's trendy, because it's flexible. When Bears talk about tight ends, the conversation usually goes something like this. Who's better, Cole Kmet or Colston Loveland? And honestly, I think that's the wrong conversation. Because the question isn't who's better, the question is who's more valuable in 11 personnel. Those aren't exactly the same thing. The best receiver isn't always the most valuable player. The best blocker isn't always the most valuable player. The most talented player isn't always the most valuable player. The most valuable player is often the player who gives the offense the greatest flexibility. And flexibility is what Ben Johnson is trying to create. Let's put ourselves in the defensive coordinator's shoes. The Bears break the huddle, 1 running back, 1 tight end, 3 receivers. Now what? You know exactly what the offense is about to do. Life is easy. But what if that tight end changes the equation? What if he's a dominant blocker? What if he's a dangerous receiver? And what if he's capable of doing both? Now the defense has a problem because it has to prepare for multiple possibilities without knowing which one is coming. And the hesitation is where the offense wins. Not after the snap, before the snap. Which is why I think this tight end battle might end up becoming one of the most important stories of the season. Let's start with Cole Kmet, because I think Bears fans have become so focused on upside that they've forgotten how valuable reliability can be. Kmet may not be the most exciting player on the roster, but coaches don't stay awake at night worrying about excitement. They worry about trust. Can I trust this player to execute the assignment? Can I trust this player to recognize the defense? Can I trust this player to make adjustments? Can I trust this player in critical situations? Let's not forget the touchdown reception against the Rams. games. Kmet has spent years building that trust. He's experienced. He's reliable. He's productive. He's a capable blocker. He's a capable receiver. And most importantly, he doesn't tell the defense what the offense is about to do. That's valuable. If Kmet is the tight end in 11 personnel, the Bears can run. They can throw. They can keep him in protection. They can move him around in the formation. The defense has to account for all of it. And that's exactly what offensive coordinators want. Now let's talk about Colston Loveland, because that's where things get really interesting. Loveland changes the geometry of the field. Linebackers have to think differently. Safeties have to think differently. Defensive coordinators have to think differently. Because when Loveland is on the field, he's not simply functioning as a traditional tight end. He's creating stress, and stress creates mistakes. Think about it this way. Defenses are comfortable when players fit into neat categories. Wide receiver, running back, tight end. Simple. Loveland makes things less simple. And when things become less simple, defenses become less comfortable. That's one of the reasons I think Bears fans are focusing on the wrong thing. The question isn't whether Loveland is going to catch a certain number of passes. The question is whether he changes how defenses plays the Bears. Because if the answer is yes, his impact may extend far beyond the stat sheet. Then there's Sam Roush. And honestly, I think his presence is one of the most interesting developments that nobody is talking about. Because Roush isn't really competing to own 11 personnel right now. At least not today. He's competing for an opportunity. He's competing for snaps. He's competing for trust. And every NFL roster needs players like that. Players who force coaches to make difficult decisions. Players who push veterans, like Cole Kmet. Players who create competition. That's how good teams improve. Could Roush eventually end up becoming a bigger part of the offense? Absolutely. In fact, that's part of what makes this room interesting. Because while everyone is focused on Kmet and Loveland, Roush is quietly trying to prove he belongs in the long-term conversation. And if he develops the way that Bears fans hope he will, we're eventually going to have a much bigger discussion. Not about one tight end, not about two tight ends, but how many talented tight ends Ben Johnson can get on the field at the same time. But that's a conversation for another day, but it's coming. Ultimately, I think we've been asking the wrong question. The question isn't whether Colston Loveland is talented. He is. The question isn't whether Cole Kmet is reliable. He is. The question isn't whether Sam Roush has potential. He does. The real question is, when Ben Johnson puts the Bears in 11 personnel, which tight end does he trust to stay on the field? Because whoever wins that role isn't just winning snaps, he's winning access to the foundation of the offense. And that's a very different conversation. If you're forcing me to answer today, I think the answer is still Cole Kmet. Not because he's the most exciting, not because he has the highest ceiling, but because right now, he's the most complete player. At least today. But here's the part that makes this fascinating. I don't know if that's still going to be true in November. I don't know if that's still going to be true in December. And I definitely don't know if that's still going to be true at the end of the season. Because the more comfortable Loveland becomes, the more difficult this conversation gets. And that's exactly why this battle matters. In fact, I think the bigger question isn't who owns 11 personnel today. The bigger question is what Ben Johnson wants 11 personnel to become. Because if Loveland develops into the player that many people think he could become, we're not talking about a tight end anymore. We're talking about a player who changes the structure of offense itself. And that's exactly what we're going to discuss next time, because in the next episode, we're going to take a deeper look at Colston Loveland. Not whether he's good. I think we all agree he's good. The question is whether he changes everything. And after that, we're going to talk about Cole Kmet. Because while everyone is chasing upside, somebody still has to earn a coach's trust. And that conversation is a lot more complicated than many Bears fans realize. So let me ask you this. If the Bears spend most of this season in 11 personnel, who should be the primary tight end? Cole Kmet, Colston Loveland, or do you think Sam Roush eventually forces his way into the discussion? Today, I think it's Kmet. By December, it might be Loveland. And somewhere in the background, Sam Roush is trying to make sure this becomes a 3-player conversation instead of a 2-player conversation. But that's just my opinion. Let me know what you think in the comments. If you've enjoyed this video, subscribe to the channel and join us as we continue building the football's greatest Bears community. And as always, bear down and FGB.